So my name is Nicholas Christian. I'm really passionate about data visualization, and I want to share some of that with you today. So I'm a software engineer at Cartogram. We're a local startup. For those of you who don't know Cartogram, I'm also the author of pivottable.js, which is a JavaScript visualization library. So today, I just want to present some thoughts on critiquing visualizations. I want to present sort of three utilitarian lenses for looking at visualizations. So three different ways you can look at these things, as maps, as tools, and as stories. I'm not saying this is a mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive way of looking at things. Not all visualizations fit into only one of these categories, and there are many that don't fit into any. But this is just sort of a set of thoughts. And I won't really be looking at the aesthetic aspects of visualization, so I won't be talking about visualizations as art. I don't feel qualified to say anything about that. So I'm inspired, some of you who know some of this body of work will recognize some of these examples from Tufty, from various blogs, jump charts, flowing data, catastrophe. Many of the examples I will be presenting here I didn't make, but I've provided sources, and this presentation is online, so you guys can drill in and look at the visualizations more closely. So jumping right in, visualizations as maps. So in 1854, there was a major cholera epidemic in London. Approximately 10% of the population of Broad Street died over a week. 1850s London was dangerous and scary, but that was really dangerous and scary. And the dominant theory about how cholera spread in the 1850s was the miasma theory. It smells bad, therefore we get sick. There was a doctor in it by the name of John Snow, no relation to the Game of Thrones character, who did some really pioneering work in data visualization. So first he collected the data by hand, walking through cholera-ridden streets, knocking on people's door, figuring out who was sick, where they lived, when they got sick, what water they drank. Because he didn't believe that cholera was spread through miasma. He believed that cholera was spread through water. And so he decided to collect a whole bunch of information. And after the fact, he put together this map. And I have a more modern version. In a second, I just want to call your attention to a couple things. These little black marks here are where people died. You can see Broad Street here. This is known as the Broad Street cholera epidemic. And he also labeled all the pumps on this map. So here's the more modern version. So the red dots are places where people died, and the blue dots are water pumps. And the Broad Street pump is right here. So he used this map to try to convince people that cholera was spread through water, and that the Broad Street water pump was actually the source of the epidemic. And some miasmatists, my new favorite word, were basically, could have claimed that, well, it's just there was a localized bad smell, and this is why people died of cholera. But the way in which he used this map is to say, well, what about those people here? Why did they get sick if the miasma was all here? Turns out he was able to prove that people here walked all the way to the Broad Street pump to get water that week, and they got sick. So this map essentially was instrumental in sort of overturning the miasma theory of cholera and proving that cholera is waterborne, although he didn't live to see the scientific establishment espouse his theory. So here's some good resources about this if you want to look. This book, The Ghost Map, is a fascinating book on the origins of epidemiology. So to me, this map exemplifies one of the key things about what makes maps really useful as visualizations, is that they enable you to reason spatially about the data. Things that are close, their closeness means something. Things that are far, their farness means something. And this is, the visualization community can learn a lot from the map making community. Map making is one of the oldest forms of visualization, but to me this is sort of the key point that I want to draw out. And so when I look at data visualizations for non-geographic data as a map, I ask myself, does this help me reason visually about the data? So as an example, this is what's called a Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. It's one of the key visual representations that people use in astrophysics. And it's a star map. It's not a star map in the sense of, sort of where are the constellations. It's a star map in a far more abstract sense. Across the bottom, you've got the color of the star. Astronomers and astrophysicists have a scale for that. And up and down the side, you've got the luminosity. How bright is this star? So in the beginning of the 20th century, when scatter plots like this were still kind of a young form of visualization, some astronomers put these maps together and they asked themselves, what is this pattern? Where does it come from? So I feel this is a really good example of data visualization as a map. They were able to say, well, you know, these things, these little dots here, every dot here, by the way, is a star. These little dots here, what do they have in common? Why are they all close together? Why is there a big gap here? And the answer to sort of why are there these clusters turns out to be intimately linked to the actual process that happens inside a star, the fusion mechanism going from hydrogen to helium, and so on. And it turns out that a star, over its very, very long lifetime, moves across this diagram from here, up, back down, and eventually becomes a white dwarf. So this is a really good example of using visualization as a map and really enabling people to reason visually about the data set. So you can read all about Hertzsprung-Russell diagrams on Wikipedia, and some people wrote a whole paper about what a remarkable scatter plot this is, if you're interested. This is a graph visualization made with Gephi, which is the tool that Sébastien was talking about. This is the only visualization of mine that's in this presentation. This is basically a map of my social network as perceived through my inbox. So every red dot here is an email address with the domain removed. They're hard to see, but there's little gray dots here which represents emails. And so every time someone was on the CC list or was in the to field of email, they show up on this graph and the email shows up. And so what happens here, this is a map of my social network because it helps you reason sort of visually. You got this little cluster down here. This is my family, right? They're on a whole bunch of common emails. You know, to mom, dad, sister, sister. Up here is a student organization I was a big part of when I was a student. Over here is my high school friends. In the middle here are sort of university friends that were linked to this organization. So you kind of have to be me to interpret this, but the point is that much as Seb said, a graph visualization can be a map. It allows you to sort of use your visual system to reason graphically to say, why are these 2 points close together? You know, why is this point here between the Toronto group and the high school group? I didn't go to high school in Toronto. Well, because it's someone I kept in touch with through university. So there's actually a lot of subtleties that come out of this kind of visualization, and I feel this is, you know, an example of how you can see a graph visualization as a map. So this is a graph I put together for a hackathon here in Montreal. You can read all about it at this link, and then I use Gephi to make the visualization. So there's a couple more maps in my deck, but we'll move on to tools. So in an abstract sense, a tool is something to help you accomplish a task. Often, the goodness of the tool is sort of proportional to how easy it is to use. How easy it is to use is a sort of a function of how well it matches the capabilities of the human body. You know, if you want to push a nail into a wall, suppose you could just push it in like that. It's pretty difficult. Turns out swinging a hammer is actually a lot easier for your body, right? Lifting a car a foot off the ground is really difficult. But with a car jack, you sort of move a lever up and down a few times. It's a lot better adapted to your body. So this is basically the sense in which I would like to look at visualizations as tools. Basically, does this visualization make it easier to accomplish the intended task with the data? There's sort of an implicit trick in there, because there's got to be an intended task. Sometimes, you know, you look at the visualization, like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this. Sometimes the visualization doesn't make actually any task particularly easier than just looking at the original source listing. So if I choose to look at a visualization as a tool, I kind of ask myself, is this easy? Does it make it easier than the sort of obvious alternative, which is looking at the raw data? It's kind of hard to be harder than that. You'd be surprised. This is a map most people have seen. It's a pretty terrible map. It doesn't actually, as a map, it's pretty terrible because it doesn't allow you to reason spatially particularly easily, right? The distance between Ville La Savane and Namur is not at all the same as Bonaventure and Square Victoria. In fact, it looks like these guys are farther apart. So if you wanted to get out your ruler and measure the distance between stations, you'd be led pretty far astray. But is it a good tool? It's an excellent tool. I use it every day. I don't forget where I am. It helps you, in fact, it's a graph visualization that shows you the structure of the Montreal Metro. So as a tool for sort of getting around by car, for example, it's pretty terrible, but as a tool for getting around by metro, it's excellent. Sorry about that. These are two sort of projections of the world, the Peters projection and the Mercator projection. And the person who made this diagram here feels that the Mercator projection is incorrect because the size of Africa is basically comparable to the size of North America, which isn't actually true. Right? The Peters projection is promoted by people who are very interested in making sure that the relative size of countries and continents are represented correctly on the map. So why is it that the Mercator projection exists? Well, it turns out the Mercator projection has a really interesting property that if you get out on a boat and you sail in a given bearing compared to your compass, if you set your boat to be 20 degrees off north, the course that you will sail will be a straight line on this map. So for a Portuguese navigator circa 1550, this is a great map. This is terrible. No one cares about this if you're sailing a boat. So as a tool for a navigator, this is great. As a tool for an educator in the modern world, this might be better for reasoning about the relative size of continents. So the intended task matters a lot. So the Peters map has a website in case you're curious about the advocacy of the Peters map. And the specific one I took came from this guy with a good rant about. The scaling isn't great here, but this is a screenshot from an article by two guys, Cleveland and McGill, on graphical perception. So there's a grid of 9, so we'll just have to look at the middle column here. But this basically speaks to using the right tool for the job. If you want someone to compare two lines, the height of two lines or the distance between them, actually showing those two lines is a pretty terrible idea, given how humans perceive distance. You might think that these two lines get closer over time. Turns out the difference between them is constant. You might think that these two lines get much closer. It turns out that they actually get further apart and then they get a little bit closer and then a little bit further apart. So when you're designing a tool, you've got to make sure that it's ergonomic, right? Sebastian was complaining about how hard Gephi is to use. That's because the human body isn't good at everything, right? It's not good at pushing nails in, it's not good at lifting cars. Turns out the human brain isn't very good at comparing two curves either. So there's a huge body of research about this, there's lots of disagreements about it, but in evaluating visualization as a tool, I asked myself, does this visualization use a structure for which the human visual system is well adapted? Or does it require me to think like a machine or to get out of a loop? And if it does, then it's probably not a great tool. So here's the reference for the paper if you're interested. This is a bit of an extended example I've pulled from the Junk Charts blog. So unfortunately the edges are cut off, sorry about this. Basically this is US sales of plug-in vehicles, and this is a pretty good example of a visualization which probably doesn't really have an intended purpose. I'm not quite sure what whoever made this was hoping that we would do with it. There are something like 18 colors on this graph, or 15, which is way more colors than most people can sort of map without going back and forth. There's a whole bunch of months being represented here. Probably the only thing you can really pull out is the pattern of the height of the bars over time. So if we try and simplify this graph a little bit, we use fewer colors, we group it by quarter instead of by month. This is getting closer to the type of thing that the human brain can parse, except on a non-color corrected projector. But it's still a little bit hard to see. Turns out this is a really common problem. This is a really common problem in business presentations. You want to show the change in the mix of some stuff over time. So plug-in manufacturers over time. It's fairly hard to see. No one can really look at this and say, well, what's the difference between Ford Q2 2013 and Tesla? It's hard to tell because they're all on the same baseline. So a different way of presenting this information, which might not be perfect, but at least has sort of fewer obvious flaws, is to present the total height in one big line and then all the other series in another line to make them directly comparable to each other. Because research shows that people are actually pretty good at comparing the heights of things off of the same baseline, rather than looking at the different lengths of two bars that don't share a baseline and are of different colors. So these are things that are worth keeping in mind when you're critiquing a visualization as a tool. This is a whole example worked out here with some other commentary. So stories is the third way I'd like to talk about looking at visualizations. I don't mean stories in the sort of narrative, or certainly not in the fictional sense, at least not on purpose. Stories in the sense, I mean, journalistic stories. So when you're reading a story in the paper, someone's trying to bring something to your attention. When you're reading a story in a blog, maybe someone's trying to convince you of something. When you're reading a scientific journal article, maybe someone's trying to say, hey, look, I've discovered something. And so, this isn't a presentation on media criticism, but, the question I like to ask myself is, do I understand what this visualization is saying, or what the author of this visualization is saying, and do I believe it? It's a good question to ask yourself pretty much everything you read, or every visualization you see. But if you're not careful, a lot of stuff can slide past your radar. You see a pattern, and you think you see a pattern. Maybe it doesn't mean what you think it means. So if I just show you this graph, rock music quality, too bad the axis is cut off. Rock music quality versus US oil production, just by sort of superimposing these two curves together, it might seem like I'm saying something, right? Usually, when you present two data series together, like, oh, these are related. No, one predicts the other. One's because of the other. Well, just on its face, I don't really think that the number of songs in the Rolling Stone 500 greatest songs of all time particularly predicts crude oil field production, which in the US, which, given that one goes down before the other, that seems to be possibly what someone may be trying to make you infer. But this is actually a really common type of visualization. Someone will basically say, look at these two curves, they go together. Clearly they must be related. One must cause the other. That's sort of an obvious statistical causation fallacy to begin with, but this is a particularly bad way to try and trick someone into thinking that. If you look at the axis, it turns out that the red series is anchored on 0, and the blue is anchored somewhere in the million something. So it's not even the same on a percentage basis. It turns out that actually the story here is actually a lot funnier. The visualization was posted on a blog called Overthinking It, so clearly it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. But basically what the guy was trying to say is that, hey, the curve for rock song quality is the same as the curve for US oil production, so clearly it must have the same mechanism. Just like we're about to reach peak oil, we've reached peak rock. We've discovered all the good rock songs, it's all over, everything's derivative now. It takes incrementally more effort to produce new rock, therefore production will go down. So that's I don't buy it. I hope no one here does, but it's kind of it's a good example of sort of an obviously misleading visualization. Again, I didn't do this work, and I'll provide a link at the end, but people will show graphs like this and claim the US is politically very divided, very polarized. Now that may well be the case, but I don't really believe that a graphic like this is the way to show that. I mean, for one thing, this type of map, which is called the core left map, sort of seems to imply that all of Texas votes the same way, all of California votes the same way. Right? Texas is red, California is blue, that's all you need to know. Well, a lot of people in Texas. So this is the same data plotted by county. So it's a little bit, actually this way it looks like it's really, really red, right? Most of the US must have voted Republican. It must be totally unfair that the Democrats got in. Obviously this is not a very good representation either. Some of these counties are really big and there aren't that many people who live there. So you rescale the map again. It doesn't look a whole lot like the states, but now each county is proportional in size to the number of people who live there. And it's a lot more nuanced, right? You actually get some islands of blue, some islands of purple, with some red in between. And you kind of get the sense that it's a bit of a mess, but it's not that stark a set of divisions. If you relook at this, by urban rural, you get some different information, but it's not quite as straightforward as red state, blue state, which is the way some of the political discourse in the States happens. So the guy who put this together has some interesting additional thoughts on some of the maps. And there's a link to a cartogram, which is the name of this type of visualization, where you distort things so that little surfaces have the same area as some variable that you care about. And I apologize in advance, but I have another US political visualization. I don't know why there doesn't seem to be as much controversial Canadian political visualization for me to use as an example. So this is a graphic that was put out by the Obama administration called the Road to Recovery, and that's too bad. It says US job loss / growth. And so this is part of the video basically saying things are getting better, we fixed things, or we're on the road to fixing things. And it's a little bit suspicious, right? These are job losses. So if you actually plot the cumulative jobs lost since the beginning of the time series, you actually see that jobs were lost while Bush was president, and other jobs were lost while Obama was president. And in fact, the way this graphic is presented, a lot more jobs were gone or whatever during the Obama administration. There's a lot more blue on the map, therefore Obama must be doing far worse. Well, again, this is a little bit of a distorted picture because why is everything anchored in December 2007? If you just look at total unemployment during that period, you see that, well, things are kind of stable. I'm guessing here, but things are kind of stable. They went down for a bit, and they're, sort of stable-ish. I mean, if I give you a graph that looks like this, and I say the road to recovery, am I saying the same thing? Do you believe me in the same way? So this, when that graph came out, a whole bunch of people were like, oh, they're lying with data, lies, damn statistics and visualizations. Well, the axis was pretty clear, but anybody just looking at the graphs, things suck, things are getting better. So don't believe everything you see. So all these graphs are produced by this guy. I don't endorse his political opinions by the people. So the key takeaways are basically, if you look at a visualization, whether it's one that you produced for yourself, just you got a spreadsheet, you did plot, or it's a visualization that someone else produced. Can I look at this as a map, as a tool, and or as a story, or do none of these apply and have to use someone else's critiquing framework? And if I can look at it as a map, does it allow me to reason spatially about this data set? Can I see clusters? Can I see patterns? Does this visualization make it easier to accomplish the intended task? Does it have an intended task? Is there any task for which this visualization is easier to use than any other? If I feel like someone's pushing a message or trying to convince me of something, do I understand what that is, and do I believe is the data set the right one? Is the visual presentation non-misleading, etc. And so, basically, I don't know if anybody's seen this graphic. It's a map of online communities by XKCD. So I'm going to quickly apply my little three-pointed framework to this map. It says it's a map of online communities. The size on the map represents the volume of daily activity on each of these sites. So, does it allow me to reason spatially about my data? Well, I suppose. Things that are close. Twitter is closer to YouTube than it is to Facebook. Sure. QQ is in China. It's behind the line that says Gulf of China. Various things are sort of laid out. I feel like what it's allowing me to reason spatially about is the author's opinion of how these social networks are related, but I suppose it'll do with that. I'm not that interested in the data set. Is it an appropriate tool for its intended purpose? Well, the only actual numerical data set being represented here are the daily activities, and each of these things, is probably scaled to that, but it turns out the human brain isn't particularly good at evaluating the relevant area of things that have different shapes and are far apart from each other. So all I really wanted to look at was, an ordered list of the daily activity for these things. I would have put it in the bar chart. So fails a little bit on the, is this good for its intended purpose? And then, do I buy the story here? Well, I don't think there's much of a story here. But the way he describes sort of the methodology for getting the data, I personally have some doubts sort of cobbled together from Google and Alexa and a bunch of other things. It's not a particularly well put together graphic to convince me of it. So that's just one way of applying this. And the source graphic is here. It's actually kind of fun to look around. There's a lot of little hidden jokes in